All right, seventh grade. Well, today we are getting heavy into what we call slope-intercept. Form. Slope-intercept form. There's a formula that you need to be aware of for slope-intercept form. And ladies and gentlemen, you need to know this formula like you know your own name. Y equals mx plus b, y equals mx plus b, y equals mx plus b. Okay? So say that to yourself 50 times before you go to bed tonight. Slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. We'll talk about what that means, but in the formula, y equals mx plus b, the m, which is connected with the x, that's the slope. The b, which is going to be, sometimes this is a plus, sometimes it's a minus, it just depends. We'll talk more about that. That number there is the y-intercept. This is arguably one of the most important things for you to get in your head before we move on to 8th grade math and algebra. Y equals mx plus b, slope-intercept form. That formula needs to be your friend. Y equals mx plus b. So what are we going to do with that? Couple sets of directions on the assignment you're assigned today. Find the slope and y-intercept of the graph of the linear function. So you're going to get a problem like this. For example, number 1, y equals 5/7 x plus 4. Now, first thing you want to do when you look at an equation is make a determination as to whether or not it is in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept forms basically means y is by itself. Y is by itself in this equation. So we're starting pretty basic. Y equals 5/7x plus 4. We have something here connected with the x. That's 5/7. That's our m in y equals mx plus b. Then we have the plus 4. This is our b, okay, or our y-intercept. So number 1 is pretty basic. Our slope, I'm going to use S for slope just to save some time. Our slope is 5/7, and our y-intercept is 4. That's pretty basic. Let's go to number 2. 6x plus y equals 7. I look at that, and I have to be realistic and say, well, that is not in slope-intercept form. That does not say y equals. So what do I do in this situation to figure out what the slope and the y-intercept is? Well, I have to rewrite my formula so that it does say y equals mx plus b. So I have to do what I know about equations. And I think about isolating the variable. It's the same philosophy in slope-intercept form. I want to isolate y. How do I isolate y? I have to get rid of the 6x. It means I have to subtract 6x from both sides. So I can rewrite this equation as y equals because I'm getting rid of the 6x. Now, you're smart, 7th graders. We're going to use the brains that are in your head. Y equals mx plus b. I know in slope-intercept form, whatever's connected with the x has to come first. So I'm not going to write 7 minus 6x because I want what's connected with the x, which is the 6x, going first. But I know that I'm subtracting it from both sides. I subtracted it from this side to get y by itself. So when I bring it to this side, I'm going to subtract it. So it's no longer a positive 6x. It is now a negative 6x. And then that 7 just becomes plus 7. Now I look. Now I have it in slope-intercept form. Y equals mx. The m is represented by negative 6. So that is my slope. My slope is negative 6. My y-intercept is my plus 7. My y-intercept is equal to 7. That is how we do that. Number 3 looks even different. Negative 4y plus 10x equals 36. This clearly is not in slope-intercept form. It does not read y equals mx plus b. Y is not by itself. But here we have an added entity because not only do we have y here, but we have a negative 4 with the y. So the first thing I want to do is isolate my negative 4y. I want to get negative 4y by itself. So I'm going to rewrite this equation as negative 4y equals. Now, so I go to my original equation where it says plus 10x on this side of my equation. To get rid of it, I have to subtract 10x. So when I come over here, my plus 10x is going to become a negative 10x. And then I'm going to add the 36. Now some of you might think, good job, Mr. Swack. Now that's in slope-intercept form. Wrong. That is not in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form requires y to be by itself. In negative 4y equals negative 10x plus 36, y is not by itself. It is connected with a negative 4. I need to isolate y. But 7th grade, you know this. This is from equations. Negative 4y, if I want to get the y by itself, I'm going to divide everything by negative 4. That's what I'm going to do. That's going to bring y by itself. Then I'm going to, all right, take negative 10, negative 10x, and I'm going to also have to divide that by negative 4, and then plus my 36 divided by negative 4. Everything gets divided by negative 4. If I do it to this side of the equation, I have to do it to everything on this side of the equation. Now I just have to go and do this. Okay, so I've already got my y. Negative 10 divided by negative 4. Well, folks, you're 7th graders. We're just going to leave things as fractions. We're not going to make it difficult. We're going to say, well, that's negative 10 and negative 4. We know that the negatives are going to cancel out. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. If I simplify 10 over 4, that's going to become, I'm going to come right up here, y equals, if I simplify negative 10 over negative 4, if I divide them both by 2, I get 5 over 2. The negative divided by a negative is a positive, so I'm going to get y equals 5 over 2x. That's what I get. When I divide the 10 and the 4 both by 2, I get 5 over 2. Then I come over here and I've got to do 36 divided by negative 4. Well, 36 divided by negative 4 is negative 9. Okay, so now for the first time, we have a negative y-intercept where it's negative 9. This now is in slope-intercept form. Y equals 5 over 2x minus 9. It's y equals, so now that I know that my slope is 5 over 2, my y-intercept is negative 9. That's how you do that. You got to break those down, show your work. This is not going to be mental math when you start to get down into these. You're going to want to show your work, show what you're doing. We'll talk more during our Zoom session, but you get an idea. Now let's talk about the second part, okay, which is essentially the same thing, but now we have the added job of graphing the linear function using slope-intercept form. So we got a couple of examples here. Number 1, y equals 5x minus 2. That's already in slope-intercept form. That is already in my, and I'm going to rewrite it up here, y equals mx plus b. Okay, that's my slope-intercept formula. Y equals 5x minus 2. That's already in slope-intercept form. Okay, so I know that my slope is 5, and I know that my y-intercept is negative 2. Y-intercept is negative 2. That's great, but it tells me I have to graph it. So what does that mean? How do I graph that? Well, this is where you're going to need to get some graph paper. And so just, I know my video is not professional work, but that's okay. We have our graph. And first of all, we're going to start with the y-intercept. Because if you know that, the y-intercept, when you have the y-intercept, that means that is the y-coordinate when x is 0. So that means that you have an ordered pair of 0, 2. The y-intercept is -2. That means that when x is 0, I come over here, y is at -2, and I go ahead and I plot that on the graph at 0, -2. I also know my slope. My slope is 5. It's a positive 5. Now remember from yesterday's lesson, a slope of 5, slope is rise over run, change in y over change in x. It tells me the slope is 5. Everything has to be a fraction though, so I'm going to think of it as 5 over 1. I'm just going to take the slope of 5 and make it a fraction, 5 over 1. It's a positive slope. So remember what that means. A positive slope is going to rise from left to right. Okay? So I'm going here to my graph. I plotted the first point, 0, -2. It's right there. And I have a slope of 5. I'm going to be going this way, rising from left to right, because it's a positive slope. It's 5 over 1. So my rise is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going to go over 1. And I'm going to see that my new ordered pair is 3, 1. That reflects the slope. Then you're going to take a straight edge. And not able to hold a straight edge and my phone at the same time. So we're just going to imagine that that's a perfectly straight line. But clearly it isn't, but you get the idea. But then you make that line and you have graphed it. Now let's go on to this second example. Here we go again. Things are connected with the y. So here we go. 5y plus 4x equals -15. Well, to be able to graph it, I first have to put it in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to have to get y by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up an equation, and I'm going to get 5y by itself and say, well, 5y equals. I'm going to take this plus 4x, and I'm going to move it to this side of the equation. It's a positive over here, so on this side of the equation, it's going to become a -4x. Okay, and then I still have my -15, so I'm just going to write in -15. But I am still not in slope-intercept form, because slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. I do not have y by itself. I have a 5 with a y. So I have to divide everything by 5. I divide everything by 5, kind of make that a 5, make that a 5, make that a 5. I'm dividing everything by 5. That's what I have to do to get y by itself. So 5y divided by 5, that would just be y equals. Now I go over here to -4x divided by 5. Don't overanalyze, folks. We do not want decimals. Do not punch into your calculator 4 divided by 5 and then on it write 0.8, which is what your calculator will tell you that 4 divided by 5 is. Don't do that. We're dealing with slope. We want fractions. You've heard me say this before, folks. We want fractions. So I just think of -4 over 5. And I think, is that in simplest form? Well, yes, it is. There's no number besides 1 that can go into both 4 and 5. So I'm going to go with y equals -4 over 5x. That's what I'm going to get there. Then I'm going to go -15 divided by 5. -15 divided by 5 is -3. So when I put that in slope-intercept form, it's y equals -4 over 5x minus 3. But I'm not done. You have to graph it. You have to graph it. So there's my equation in slope-intercept form. Y equals -4/5 x minus 3. Now remember, I know the y-intercept. The y-intercept is -3. That means that my first ordered pair, x is 0, y is -3. That's what y-intercept means. Where does it cross the y-axis when x is 0? Which is what x will be when it crosses the y-axis. So I go to my graph, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to want 0, -3. So I go to 0, I go down to -3, and I plot a point. That's what I do, 0, -3. So there it is. But then I go, now I have a -4/5 slope. It is a negative slope. A negative slope will fall from left to right. It will fall that way. Everything with slope is left to right. A negative slope falls left to right. A positive slope rises from left to right. So I come over here, it's -4/5x. Remember, that's rise over run, but it's going down 4. So I'm saying, okay, it's going to fall from left to right. So I go here to my graph. I'm going to go down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to go over 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there I'm going to have a point. I now will take my straight edge, and doesn't work very well trying to hold the phone, but you get the idea. I put the arrows to show. 7th graders, I do want you to use a straight edge of some sort. Protractor, ruler, do something to make a straight line. But that is how you graph linear functions in slope-intercept form. Have a fabulous day.